Hello, my name is Tony. Here's what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on detailing the narrative or describing the story in any depth. My focus is to be more concerned with providing some background, exploring the themes and analysing the finished product as a piece of art, along with considering the cultural impact in the context of a general critical appraisal and evaluation that has shifted emphasis over time. There are three main versions of the movie available now. The original theatrical cut, which constituted an act of wanton butchery by MGM studio head James Aubrey, a simple self-destructive case of spiteful vandalism if ever there was one. That's the version we all got to see when it was released into theatres, made its debut. When I say we, I mean general audiences and professional critics alike. Then there's the Peckinpah's final preview cut, which is a bit rough and ready with inferior sound. Finally, what is referred to as the Turner Cut. Peckinpah's editor, Roger Spotiswoode, smuggled the preview version out of the studio without James Aubrey realising and kept it under wraps until 1988, when it was screened on the Turner channel and released on Laserdisc. It's considered to be the closest thing to Peckinpah's original vision. The new 4K digital restoration of this version, the 50th anniversary or special edition cut, which runs slightly shorter than the preview version, has been supervised by Spotiswoode and fellow editor Paul Sador. The working consensus being that this is now the most definitive iteration, as close as we'll get, and who am I to disagree? All three are included in the latest Criterion Blu-ray release, which will set you back somewhere in the region of 50 UK quid, and it's the restored Turner cut that informs this review for the most part, along with my sometimes unreliable memories of the theatrical release when I first saw it in the cinema. Some background then. The Santa Fe Ring was an entrepreneurial power collective operating in territorial New Mexico in the years 1865 to 1912. It consisted of high-profile politicians, attorneys, and land speculators. Their operations were based on the imposition of power and control via the acquisition of millions of acres of land in the territories. The Ring was implicated in various range wars and feuds. The film opens in 1909. An aging lawman, Pat Garrett, James Coburn, is riding with a group of men working for the Santa Fe Ring, whose number include one John W. Poe, John Beck. The men turn on Garrett and kill him in cold blood, like maybe they're acting under orders to do so. An overarching theme of betrayal and resulting murder is established from the outset. The rest of the narrative kicks off in the year of 1881 in old Fort Sumner. William Bonney, known as Billy the Kid, Chris Christopherson, and his gang are joined by Pat Garrett. Garrett, an old associate of Billy, informs him that the electorate want him out of the country. He's facing charges of multiple murder and just about everything else of a criminal nature. Garrett will take on the role of Sheriff of Lincoln County in 5 days. This is a warning to haul ass before the shit hits the proverbial fandango. Billy and his gang don't leave. 6 days later, Garrett and his deputies engage in a gunfight with the outlaws at a farmhouse, where the gang are holed up. Billy is captured. His escape from captivity results in Garrett leading the manhunt to track him down, a manhunt sanctioned by the state governor and funded by the influential Santa Fe Ring. The core of the film is the pursuit of Billy by Garrett. Simplistically, that's the deal, and as far as I'm going to go in terms of background and storyline where this review is concerned. Peckinpah saw the film as an opportunity to articulate his final word on the deconstruction of the mythology of the Old West. As it turned out, it was to be his last Western movie. The production was beset by difficulties generated by studio interference, most notably that of MGM Reichsführer James Aubrey, budget restrictions, time constraints, mechanical failure, cast ill health, painstaking reshoots, and Peckinpah's out-of-control alcoholism and volatile behaviour. The film set was described as a battleground by producer Gordon Carroll. Despite what others might feel and say, I think Peckinpah was the ultimate Western movie fan at heart. He just wanted to approach the genre with a certain honesty. It was, after all, a brief but wonderfully rich and tumultuous period in American history, a time of conflict, exploration, lawlessness and freedom that passed into legend as it was rapidly eclipsed by technology and an emerging new order, the germ of what was to become corporate America. Big business, the cartels were marshalling their forces and muscling in with their money, ruthless carpetbagging and political big guns. What they couldn't buy, they would take however they could take it. I've known Peckinpah stand accused of lacking respect for the classic Western movies, by Duke Wayne for instance, but then Duke had some interesting ideas and notions about stuff. Once more, I don't think this was the case. He deliberately references those films time and again in his revisionist framework. It is no accident that the supporting cast of Pat Garrett includes the following familiar players: Chill Wills, Rio Grande, Katie Jurado, High Noon, Jack Elam, the Comancheros, Slim Pickens, One-Eyed Jacks, Barry Sullivan, 40 Guns, Dub Taylor, the fastest gun alive, R.G. Armstrong from Hell to Texas, Elisha Cook Jr., Shane, Paul Fix, Hondo, Jason Robards, Hour of the Gun, as well as Richard Jekyll, Harry Dean Stanton, and L.Q. Jones. Not to mention a little-known singer-songwriter called Bob Dylan as the mercurial knife fighter Alias, an ally of Billy. Dylan also contributed the haunting soundtrack, complete with a classic folk-pop standard, Knocking on Heaven's Door. When it comes to representing and embracing Western and folk mythology against the background of popular culture, Peckinpah was certainly not shy. Everything in place, it seemed like a dream on paper, and it could have been the best thing the director ever did, only it wasn't and isn't. It's the thing that aspired to greatness but fell short. I love it for what it is. More than that, I accept it for what it is, but I harbour vicarious regret for what it could and should have been. Although they may not spend much screen time together, Garrett and Billy are the twin linchpins around which the narrative revolves. In the original screenplay by Rudy Two-Lane Blacktop Wurlitzer, they didn't meet at all until the end. When Peckinpah came on board to direct at the behest of James Coburn, he rewrote the script, which Wurlitzer bitterly resented by all accounts. Tough luck, chum, but once you flog a screenplay or novel to Hollywood, you don't have ownership of it anymore. It's theirs. You sell a car to someone, none of your business how they dress it up and drive it. So expect cha-cha changes. Duh. The cast is hard to fault overall, and Coburn invests his heart and soul in Pat Garrett. He's perfect as a craggy, world-weary lawman on a mission that will change his life and, by default, the West forever. Once he betrays his friendship with Billy and kills him, nothing will be the same. Coburn absorbs the inner conflict and wears the bitter taste in torment on his face like a mask of pain-chiseled granite. In a way, it's counterproductive he's so good at channeling that damaged humanity, because it serves to throw unflattering shade on the sorry miscasting of Christopherson as Billy the Kid. I mean, come on, you've got a laid-back country and western singer, age 36, playing a 21-year-old hip young gunslinger. It looks wrong, it feels wrong, and it sort of plays wrong. Probably because it is wrong. Originally, Peckinpah wanted Bo Hopkins for the part, and I can see that fit making sense. Think of his wired performance in The Wild Bunch. I don't want to be too down on old Christopherson because he does his level best, but it's hard to buy into his low-energy interpretation of a high-energy gunslinger, an impetuous youngster supposedly full of vigour, overconfidence, and hormonally charged with latent violence. So, help me make it through the script, then. Conversely, Bob Dylan subverted expectations by being surprisingly good. It was his first real acting role, and it's not a big part, but it does have impact. The enigmatic Alias is a shorter, scruffier, lower-key alternative version of Coburn's lethal knife thrower Britt in The Magnificent Seven. He fits into the tapestry of the movie like he really belongs there. He saves Billy's life by landing his knife into the neck of a would-be attacker, a dust-caked guardian angel, an automatic Western myth, seemingly without having to try too hard. Dylan is one of the things I remember vividly from my first viewing, and not just because he is Dylan or because he scored the film, essentially because of his performance as Alias. There are three key moments I want to pick over, moments I feel when combined encapsulate best the mood and themes of the film. Coincidentally, they are the things I remember with most clarity from my first viewing. Number 1. When Billy is in captivity at the Lincoln County Jail awaiting his execution, the gallows being erected outside, he is physically brutalized and verbally abused by obnoxious Deputy Sheriff Bob Ollinger, R.G. Armstrong. Garrett intervenes and warns Ollinger off before leaving to collect taxes from the locals. Billy finds a 6-gun secreted for him in the outhouse. He kills the deputy guarding him. He retrieves Ollinger's shotgun, which his tormentor had used to threaten him, boasting it was loaded with 16 thin dimes. Billy blasts him to death in the street, both barrels, delivering a super deadpan line, a quip worthy of a Bond film.
Keep change, Bob.
One of the great payoffs in Western movie history. It's also a reminder of the nature of Billy the Kid and the unforgiving world of the West. Both will kill you in cold blood without hesitation, no compunction or regret. Number 2. Garrett meets with veteran Sheriff Colin Baker, Slim Pickens, in the hope he can inform on Billy's whereabouts. He and his wife, Katie Girardo, accompany Garrett to arrest some of Billy's gang. In a gunfight, the gang members are killed, and Baker is mortally wounded. He lies by a river to die as his woman looks on and weeps. Dylan's knocking on heaven's door kicks in. This being Slim Pickens and Katie Girardo, 2 legendary Western actors from some classic Western movies, adds increased poignancy and meaning. It's another melancholic metaphor for the Old West dying, fading away. Dylan's song becomes the soundtrack for the incremental passing of an age and its people. They become ghosts in the landscape, icons turn into stone as the sun sets and the river flows. It's a beautiful moment, one which Peckinpah frames and shoots with bruised sensitivity and restrained pathos. In his preview cut, he excised the song almost completely, stating by way of explanation that Dylan was forced on him by the studio. Odd, because when the movie was in its formative stages and he met with the guy, he was reported to be wildly enthusiastic about his involvement and eager to work with him. The track was present in the original theatrical release and is back in the Spotiswoode Sador remaster. To the point though, great as it is, I feel it a little overused to some extent. I would say that it's an essential accompaniment to Pickens' death scene, and I was mostly glad to see it reinstated in full. Number 3. The final confrontation between Garrett and Billy. It takes place back at Fort Sumner, where Billy is shacked up with his girlfriend Maria, played by Rita Coolidge, Christopherson's then wife. Garrett has arrived with 2 deputies, one of whom is a glory-seeking John W. Poe. A semi-clothed Billy encounters the deputies outside the cabin, and they are too afraid to draw down on him. Billy backs away into a bedroom where Garrett is waiting. The lawman bushwhacks his old friend, shooting and killing him. Seeing a mirror instantly consumed by self-loathing, Garrett shoots it to pieces, his image fragmented, distorting. He has performed an act of betrayal and murder, which now ultimately defines him. When Poe attempts to amputate Billy's trigger finger for a trophy, Garrett belts him and sends him on his way. The prologue would suggest Poe held something of a grudge. Garrett sits on the porch, brooding, ruminating until sunrise, when the Fort Sumner residents gather to see Billy's lifeless corpse. Garrett saddles up, and as he rides away, a small boy throws stones at him. Now initially I thought it an underwhelming conclusion. Then with time and distance I reconsidered, and I now think it makes a powerful and complex statement that's almost on a par with the Wild Bunch. There are parallels with Deke Thornton's treachery and his tortured ambivalence about it. For a stake in the future, to move on, Garrett sells out his friend. Was it worth it? Well, now he must live with it with himself, and maybe in the end, in his final moments, which was seen at the beginning of the film, he realised how he had sold his soul to a corporate machine that ultimately cares nothing for him, and in so doing sowed the seeds of his own destruction. In murdering Billy, Garrett symbolically kills the Old West, which realistically wasn't that old, but like Billy, it was too wild, untamed, unpredictable to be tolerated long term, and progress tends to annihilate that which it seeks to supersede. The shooting of his reflection in the mirror establishes how Garrett cannot bear to look upon himself in the light of what he has done. Not simply a betrayal of a person, but a betrayal of a culture, a way of life, a mythos. Maybe even, whisper it softly, a betrayal of his purer self. Even worse, his modus operandi is to commit the cardinal Western movie transgression, the cowardly act of getting the drop on someone when their back is turned. Duke Wayne would have faced them down mano a mano. Not so Pat Garrett. When he rides away, the contempt in which he is now held is perfectly encapsulated by the child who throws stones at him. A little kid with no formal education instinctively recognizes what he has done, judges him, identifies him as a pariah, and treats him accordingly, throwing rocks. The film looks a treat, wonderful on the eye. John Coquillon's cinematography is beatific, capturing the elegiac grandeur of wide-open spaces and barren vistas, while sketching a dusty, grainy intimacy in the townships and Spartan interiors. There is action, gunfights, shootouts, pursuit, but no mass killings and carnage to equal the Wild Bunch. Characters get whacked individually rather than in multitudes, so most every death is a more personalised affair. Although Peckinpah still indulges his penchant for slow motion, don't go expecting too many gallons of spurting blood or images of ruined flesh. It's violent, sure, but not explicitly or gratuitously so. Peckinpah's visual, literary and emotional sense of dark lyricism and rough-hewn poetry raps out a nihilistic vision of the West, but never stoops to romanticize the legend to excess. It's a dirty business, all this killing, yeah? In transit, it is slow-paced, much of it a travelogue chronicling the manhunt throughout landscapes and pit stops, and it does meander on its way for periods. Plenty of time for contemplation and dwelling on just why Garrett feels he must commit to this action, when it's so counterintuitive to his instincts and history. Maybe that's the thing about progress and a desire to belong, be a part of the future, getting on board with a bigger picture. Sacrifices will be made, and Garrett makes them, but not without paying a price. Was the expense worth it? Nope, probably not. By the end, you may well feel like you've experienced the long journey every grueling step of the way along with the characters. It can be a touch wearying, but maybe that's the effect Peckinpah intended. Although the pacing is languorous, settling down into a stop-start rhythm after the initial action-heavy first 20 minutes, it is still a monumental testament to a master filmmaker who, in the face of circumstantial and personal adversity, delivered a Western flick of singular artistic worth, despite, as I'm ever fond of saying, all its flaws. If you find yourself able to sit back, dim down the lights, chill out, and savour it on its own terms, then I think it's a fascinating, rewarding experience for any Western or Peckinpah fan. Only make sure it's the Turner Cut special edition thing you're watching. Avoid the theatrical release like it's a fucking plague. It's for the best. Trust me.